Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. To the elites, thank you so much. The dedication and love comes right back at you tenfold. If you are new to the channel and you begin to like what you are hearing, please hit that like button and leave a comment down below. It lets the algorithm know that you've enjoyed this video. If you'd like to become part of Back to Ashes, please hit that subscribe button and set your notification bell to all. That way you know every time I upload a video. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Creepy Backwoods Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. As a child, I split my time between England and Ireland because of family on both sides. Wherever we were, family outings almost always involved visiting a castle. I've lost track of how many I've explored over the years. In England, those trips usually happened with my grandparents, and the castles were often impressive, grand, well-kept structures that felt like stepping into history books. But when we moved back to Ireland, the adventure shifted to castle hunting with my dad. He loves seeking out obscure sites, and honestly, I wasn't a big fan. The places he chose were usually tiny and underwhelming compared to the English ones. Most weren't true castles at all, just 16th century fortified houses. Ireland has stunning castles, but the famous ones are either private property or packed with tourists. So Dad always went for the hidden, forgotten ones. One day, after some online research, he picked out a remote ruin straddling the border area between Leinster and Munster, possibly in Tipperary, though I can't be sure anymore. We drove for about an hour through empty countryside until we reached a quiet field dotted with cows or sheep. Right in the middle stood the object of our search. This wasn't another modest fortified house. The ruins rose fairly high, with two tall round towers still standing out of what had once been four. No one had bothered preserving it. Ivy and weeds completely smothered the stonework. Yet, for an Irish ruin, it felt genuinely striking and worth the effort to reach. We crossed into the field to wander around. Almost immediately, I noticed a pitch-black opening leading into some kind of chamber or room. Curiosity tugged at me, but the darkness was absolute. Nothing visible beyond the threshold. I've always hated dark and closed spaces, yet this time an odd, powerful pull drew me toward it, almost like an invitation from something unseen. The urge felt alien and insistent, battling my usual terror of the unknown. For once, my fear and fascination were perfectly balanced, leaving me frozen in indecision. Eventually, I turned away and continued exploring the rest of the site. A little farther on, I found another opening, this one a narrow tunnel. It wasn't completely lightless. I could see a short way inside before the shadows took over. Again, that same compelling draw washed over me, urging me to step in. This time, I pushed past my nerves, something very rare for me, and walked in without a light or even my phone's flashlight. I advanced until the daylight faded completely behind me. Standing at the edge of true blackness, the pull intensified, like an invisible hand trying to guide me deeper. But fear finally overpowered the temptation, and I backed out to find my dad. When I told him about the tunnel, he grabbed his flashlight and went in to check. From outside, I watched the beam sweep around. I expected him to venture further, but he quickly returned. When I asked why he stopped, he explained that just where the light ended, the floor dropped away in a deep pit lined with sharp, broken stones and bricks at the bottom. Hearing that sent a chill through me. Only minutes earlier, I'd stood right at that brink, nearly letting that strange compulsion pull me forward into what could almost certainly have been a deadly fall. We poked around the ruins a bit more before heading back to the car. On the drive home, I asked if he'd check out the first completely dark entrance I'd mentioned. My dad, ex-military, the guy who's never flinched at heights or risks, he once scaled our roof just to repaint the chimney, admitted he hadn't gone in. Even with his flashlight, he said the darkness there unnerved him too much to proceed. I've visited countless castles across the UK and Ireland, many with creepy, shadowy corners, but none ever affected me like this one. It genuinely felt as if something was actively calling me into those voids. And if it was, did it want me to stumble into that jagged pit? I've wondered about that a lot. Just to wrap this up, I recently tried to identify the castle from the story. I tried websites about obscure Irish ruins, but nothing matched the description. Two prominent round towers, heavily overgrown, not a typical tower house. Even asking ChatGPT turned up suggestions that didn't fit. I checked with my dad again, but too much time has passed, and he can't recall the name or exact spot. He thinks he might have photos saved somewhere and plans to dig them up eventually. So, what do you reckon? Was something genuinely trying to draw me into that ruin and perhaps to my harm? Or was it simply my imagination running wild in an eerie abandoned place? It could easily be the latter. For generations, my family had called a remote 1,500-acre property in Oregon's Wallowa Mountains home. It sat tucked away not far from the small town of Joseph, surrounded by dense stands of towering pine and fir that stretched across rugged ridges and shadowed valleys. The main house, constructed by my great-grandfather in the 1960s, felt like an anchor in the vast wilderness. Summers there were filled with a deep sense of freedom and safety, except for one particular corner of the land. Roughly 600 yards west of the house, past a faint game trail and down a gentle slope, there was a small section of forest that everyone in the family simply steered clear of. Nothing about it looked obviously wrong. Same healthy trees, same dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Yet, an unspoken agreement had taken root there long before I was born. Children never played there. Adults never wandered in that direction. When I was little and asked my cousins about it, they would shift uncomfortably, mumbled something about it feeling off, and then changed the subject. The grown-ups brushed away questions with talk of mountain lions or bears, but I noticed they never set foot near it either. By age 10, the boundary was as real to me as any fence. Everything changed the summer I turned 12. When my friend Emily came to stay for a week, she lived in Portland, full of city energy and fearless curiosity. Ghost stories made her roll her eyes. horror films were just bad special effects. When I casually mentioned the forbidden patch of the woods, her face lit up. "It's literally just trees," she said with a laugh. "Let's go check it out. We can build something cool." Her certainty was contagious. Despite the knot in my stomach, I agreed. We grabbed gloves, a hatchet, and some rope from the barn, and set off that afternoon. At first, the walk felt ordinary, but the deeper we went, the more the atmosphere thickened. The sunlight stayed bright. The trees stood tall and green, yet a heavy stillness settled over everything. Our laughter died away. Birds stopped calling. Even the breeze seemed to vanish. We pretended not to notice and started gathering branches to lean against the thick fir, trying to construct a simple shelter. But every movement felt slower, heavier. Goosebumps flared from head to toe. Emily's usual chatter faded to short, tense sentences. We both kept glancing over our shoulders. Then, without warning, a wave of pure instinct hit us both. Leave now. No sound, no visible threat, just an overwhelming certainty that staying meant danger. We dropped everything and ran. Branches tore at our clothes and skin as we crashed blindly toward the open ground around the house. We didn't stop until we reached the porch, gasping, tears stinging our eyes, unable to explain what had terrified us so badly. That night, the usual evening chorus of crickets and distant coyotes never started. The silence outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. We barely slept, huddled together, straining to hear any sound at all. The next morning, we barely spoke over breakfast. The missing tools gnawed at us. We couldn't bear the thought of confessing to my grandparents that we'd left their things behind. So after forcing down some food, we headed back, slowly, reluctantly, toward the place we both now dreaded. The forest was even quieter than before. No rustle of leaves, no distant bird. When we reached the half-built shelter, we stopped dead. A deer laid in the center of the clearing, neck broken and throat torn open in one violent gash. Fresh blood glistened in the sun, yet nothing had fed on it. No drag marks, no scavenger tracks. It looked arranged. Worse still, our scattered gloves and tools had been collected into a tiny pile right beside the animal's head. Every item accounted for, except one glove. We snatched what we could and fled again, heart slamming, not daring to look back. That evening, after Emily went to shower, I stepped onto the porch for air. On the bench under my bedroom window sat the missing glove, placed with care, streaked with mud. It hadn't been there earlier. Something had followed us home. 20 years later, after my grandparents passed and the property eventually came to me, I returned alone. The house looked almost unchanged, but the sight of those western trees still sent ice through my veins. I spent the days sorting memories in old photographs, trying to convince myself the childhood terror had been exaggerated. That night, I sat on the porch with a drink, watching the shadows lengthen. The unnatural quiet returned. No wind, no wildlife, just weighty silence. I went inside early, locked everything, and tried to sleep in their old bedroom. Around midnight, the motion light snapped on. Gravel shifted once under a careful step. I froze. Then came a single, deliberate knock on the window glass. Sharp, unmistakable. One knock only. I stayed pressed against the wall until dawn. When I finally looked outside, the porch was empty. On the bench lay a strange, weathered leather glove that belonged to no one I knew. Inside it was a freshly broken piece of antler, still damp at the fracture. I sold the land within weeks to a conservation trust with one ironclad condition: nothing built, no trails, no access west of the main ridge. I gave no explanation, and they asked for none. As I drove away for the last time and glanced in the rearview mirror at that strange stretch of forest, I understood something clearly. Whatever lived there had waited patiently for decades. It had never wanted to harm us outright. It simply wanted to be left alone. And now, at last, it would be. I used to believe my ex was one of the good ones. Truly. That's why I agreed when he suggested a hiking trip far out in the forest, just the two of us. I'm not exactly the rugged, nature-loving type. I'm more of a city girl who prefers parks with paved paths. But I loved him, trusted him completely, so I said yes. People say traveling together reveals a partner's true character. Add deep in the wilderness to that, and it becomes a crash course in who they really are. In this case, it revealed a total psychopath. We planned the trip meticulously. He, let's just call him Ethan, spent days mapping routes and bought all sorts of fancy gear: a high-end compass, a satellite GPS device, the works. He claimed he'd hiked these trails countless times and knew every inch like an expert. That should have raised an eyebrow, but I brushed it off. On the drive there, he rambled about the area's beauty and its potential dangers, which was why we'd start with an easy day hike, crash a motel nearby that night for some fun, then return for a proper 2-night camping adventure on day 3. He wasn't lying about the scenery. Late summer bleeding into autumn painted the trees in vivid reds and golds. It was gorgeous. I paint with acrylics as a hobby, so I half joked that I wished I'd packed supplies to capture it from the trailhead. Ethan shot me a look and muttered something about me being too scared to actually hike. I took it as playful teasing. My pride flared up and I grabbed my backpack, daring him to keep up as I marched ahead. For a while, it felt playful and sweet, me leading, him chasing, then catching me for a kiss in a sun-dappled clearing. I handed the lead back to him, trusting his supposed expertise. No trail signs, no blazes, but hey, he knew the place, right? We stopped for lunch, basic snacks from a convenience store. I grabbed the toilet paper from my pack and headed off to find a private spot. Ethan stared like I suggested something outrageous. He called peeing outside disgusting, but then praised me for being smart enough to bring TP. I asked how he planned to handle bathroom breaks on our multi-day campout. He laughed it off awkwardly, like the thought hadn't crossed his mind. That struck me as odd for a self proclaimed seasoned hiker, but I let it slide, figuring maybe he just wasn't used to camping with women. When I got back, he'd already repacked and was eager to keep moving. By the sun and our timing, I suggested we turn around soon to reach the car before dark. He agreed vaguely, then added he'd been thinking we could hike until sunset. I pointed out that stumbling through dense woods and pitch black, even with our emergency lights, was insane. He got defensive, sulky, snapped, "Fine," and stormed off, straight the wrong way, deeper in. I tried correcting him gently a few times. Each suggestion made him angrier, moodier. I'd never seen this side of him. I offered water, worried he was overheating. He snatched the bottle, chugged sloppily, and spilled half on the ground. Another dumb move for someone supposedly experienced. By mid-afternoon, we were obviously farther from the parking lot. I planted my feet, hands on hips, and said, "Okay, admit it. We're lost." He denied it furiously, insisting he was a pro, and we were almost back. I asked to see the fancy GPS. He pulled out the boxed, unopened, uncharged device. When I called him out on it, he nearly chucked it into the trees in a rage. I had to grab his wrist to stop him. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the guy I'd known. Calmly, I proposed we use the map, compass, and landmarks to orient ourselves. No judgment, just practical. But that wounded his ego. He exploded, screaming insults, calling me every name in the book, ending with the ugliest slur I'd ever heard directed at me. I stood stunned, waiting for an apology that never came. Instead, he sneered that if I thought I knew better, I could find my own way back. He'd wait at the car. Then he stomped off. Again, wrong direction, flipping me off over his shoulder. I almost yelled that I had the keys, but screw that. I sat for a minute, cried a little, ate a snack to steady myself, then started back the way I was sure we'd come. I recognized snapped branches, familiar rocks. After about 30 minutes, I felt smug. I was doing fine without him. Then came the crack of branches behind me. A voice, high, mocking, cartoonish hillbilly, called out something like, "You done messed up, girlie. You wandered into our neck of the woods." Terror hit. I bolted. My first panicked worry was for Ethan's safety. I ran carefully, staying on what felt like our path, while the voice pursued, yelling grotesque threats about skinning me, mounting trophies, nightmarish stuff straight out of a slasher film. We'd watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre together recently. Great timing. I hid in a hollow stump, heart pounding. The voice faded, then grew distant, taunting about awful things. I crept forward, slightly. Then I spotted a figure ahead, back turned, peeking around a tree. It called out, "Here, piggy, gonna roast ya." The voice matched the figure perfectly, and the figure was Ethan. It clicked. He'd been a theater kid in college. This psycho redneck was him, play acting to scare me, probably thinking it was hilarious. But after his rage earlier, I wasn't sure how fake the danger was. I had options: sneak by, confront him, or defend myself. Instead, I picked up a pebble, tossed it far in his direction. He chased the noise like a cartoon character. I crouched low and hurried the other way. Soon I spotted the massive twisted tree I'd admired at the start, the one I wanted to paint. Minutes later, I burst into the parking lot, jumped in my car, and debated leaving him stranded. But guilt won out. I didn't want his death on me. Plus, I wanted answers. I keep a small licensed handgun in the glove box. He never knew that part. I tucked it under my purse on my lap, then honked repeatedly to guide him back. He emerged looking sheepish, yet still a bit cocky. As I drove off, he stayed quiet. Eventually, I broke the silence. The scariest thing just happened. Some deranged cannibal redneck chased me through the woods. I thought I was dead. He grinned. Did the voice sound like this? I feigned shock. You heard it too? And he burst out laughing. It was me. All me. Classic actor move, right? Hilarious. I stared straight ahead and asked if he'd really meant to terrify me that bad. He acted appalled, claiming he never imagined it would upset me. He was just joking around. We drove in tense silence. He kept asking if I was mad. At a gas station with a diner and cell service, I said I'd consider forgiving him if he bought me a hot dog. The second he stepped inside, I floored it and didn't stop for an hour. At the next rest area, my phone exploded with his texts. Apologies at first, then rage, calling me names, demanding I come back. I replied that he should Uber or hitchhike with a trucker, and hoped they weren't the cannibal type. Then I blocked him forever. I checked Facebook later. He made it home. He posted some vague, self-pitying apology about hurting someone he loved. Comments assumed something far worse. People called him garbage. I almost clarified, but decided against it. Weirdest vacation ever. Weirdest boyfriend. Best party story. The time I wasn't actually hunted by a backwoods killer. We never planned for our wedding anniversary camping trip to turn into one of those tales we'd recount for the rest of our lives. The idea was straightforward: a quiet, romantic escape between the open sky, just the two of us reconnecting away from daily chaos. My friend Dylan had come in possession of a vast stretch of farmland close to Brazaka, Georgia, and he generously offered us free run of the place. It sounded ideal, secluded, peaceful, remote enough to truly unplug, yet not so far that we couldn't reach help if required, or so we believed. It was the height of August in northwest Georgia, when the days simmered with oppressive heat and the nights brought only modest cooling. I packed my Ford F-250 diesel with essentials, stacks of firewood, tents, and sleeping gear, plus a large tarp to rig over the truck bed for shelter. My girlfriend, now my wife, added snacks, extra blankets, and a cooler to the cab. We shared light-hearted banter while loading up, teasing each other about roughing it, even if we half-jokingly longed for modern comforts like air conditioning and internet. We set out in the late afternoon, taking our time on quiet rural roads that wound through gentle hills and open fields. The setting sun bathed everything in warm amber light, and far off, flashes of heat lightning occasionally lit the sky, typical for a Georgia summer. Cell service was spotty out there, but we embraced the isolation, happy for the absence of notifications and interruptions. We turned onto Dylan's property and navigated a long, twisting dirt path deep into the acreage, far from any pavement. The track eventually gave way to an expansive harvested cornfield bordered by a distant line of trees, with the river lying just beyond. We picked a level spot roughly 100 yards from the water's edge. The soil felt solid under the tires, though I noted silently that heavy rain could turn it treacherous quickly. With the sky still clear and the atmosphere thick and still, flooding seemed the furthest thing from our minds. I positioned the truck securely, the tarp overhead to create a cozy canopy above our air mattress, and built a fire nearby. The logs caught quickly, their soft pops blending with the evening chorus of cicadas. We cooked steaks over the flames in a cast iron pan, savoring the smoky aroma as we sat on the tailgate, legs dangling, sharing quiet conversation while watching distant lightning flicker harmlessly along the horizon. In that moment, the world felt vast and empty except for us, and ordinary worries seemed miles away. By midnight, the fire had dwindled to glowing coals. We slipped under the tarp and settled onto the mattress. She nestled against me, her breathing soon steady and deep in sleep. I drifted off to the gentle rustle of the tarp in the faint breeze. I woke some time later to a deep, rolling growl of thunder. My eyes snapped open in the dark. She remained asleep beside me. The lightning flashes were sharper now, more frequent, and a cool wind tugged at our makeshift shelter. I grabbed my phone. No bars, no weather alerts. The thunder grew nearer, insistent. I lay there hoping the system would skirt past us, but instinct warned otherwise. Before I could decide what to do, fat raindrops began smacking the tarp. Sharp, urgent warnings. My heart rate spiked. "Hey," I whispered, shaking her gently. "We might need to pack up." She mumbled groggily. "Huh? What's wrong?" The response came in a sudden, ferocious blast of wind that rattled the tarp violently. Rain exploded sideways in sheets, finding every gap in the fabric and drenching us instantly. "Get up, get dressed, we have to leave now," I yelled over the roar. Adrenaline flooded through me. I scrambled into the boots as the truck rocked from the gusts. She bolted upright, confusion giving way to alarm. The storm had erupted from calm to chaos in moments. I jumped down into the mud that was already forming, lightning revealing our utter solitude in the vast field. The ground was turning slick and sucking. Each step fought to claim my footwear. We had no clue yet how dire things would become, or how fast the river, once placid, was swelling toward us, concealed by the deafening downpour. The rain stung like cold darts. Everything blurred into shadow, broken only by blinding flashes. My pulse thundered in my ears. "We have to hurry," I shouted against the wind. "Help me get the tarp down before it tears away." She nodded, face streaked with rain and determination. Her chilled fingers wrestled with the wet straps until the tarp finally gave way, whipping off into the darkness like a ghost. "Forget it," I called. The campfire was drowned, embers hissing under pooling water. I dashed to the driver's door, slipping and hauling myself inside. She climbed in beside me, slamming the door. The cab filled with our ragged breaths, windows steaming. I fired up the engine. "Brace yourself," I said, engaging four-wheel drive. The truck lunged, tires turning mud in wild sprays. We moved forward briefly, then bogged down again, wheels spinning futilely. "We're stuck," I said, voice tight. I pointed to the firewood stack. "We need to shove that under the tires for traction." We plunged back out into ankle-deep water that had risen shockingly fast. Hauling armloads of logs, we'd slip and staggered, fighting the sucking mud. Lightning illuminated the horror. The river had burst its banks, a dark rushing flood spreading toward our spot. "It's coming up fast," I gasped. "We might have to abandon the truck and run." Her eyes widened in shock, but resolve hardened her features. She nodded. We wedged the wood beneath each tire as quickly as possible, hands numb, lungs burning. "Ready?" I shouted. Back in the cabin, I floored it. The engine howled. Tires bit wood and churned. Nothing at first, just grinding. "More wood," I yelled through the window. She tossed pieces frantically under the wheels. The truck jerked, gained a few inches, then more. With a final desperate surge, it broke free, clawing onto better ground. We crept toward the dirt road, the field behind us vanishing underwater. Relief hit me like a wave as we reached the path. I glanced at her, drenched, mud-coated, but alive. We drove in stunned silence through the storm toward town, not daring to look back. Reaching pavement felt like salvation. In Calhoun, we pulled into the first motel's lot. Under the covered entrance, we stepped onto firm concrete, leaving muddy footprints. The night clerk, an older man with weary eyes, looked up from his book. His expression shifted to concern at our sodden, filthy state. "Are you folks okay?" I managed a weak grin. "Camping by the river, flooded fast, barely got out." He studied us a moment, then slid a key across the counter. "Room's on the house tonight. Glad you're safe." We thanked him quietly and retreated to the room. We stripped off ruined clothes and showered away layers of Georgia clay, wincing at unnoticed cuts. Then we collapsed into clean sheets, too wired to sleep deeply. Morning brought bright sun and deceptive calm. Aching but curious, we drove back to survey the damage. The access road was a quagmire. From the edge, we stared at what had been our campsite, now a broad lake of brown water. The spot where we'd fought so hard, completely submerged. A shiver ran through me. 5 more minutes of delay. We might not have escaped. Later, Dylan called. When I recounted the night, he went quiet. "That river's only flooded like that once in my lifetime," he said finally. "Never anything this bad." After the call, we sat in reflection. She shook my hand. "Hotels from now on?" I smiled faintly. "Definitely." We married the following year. Nearly 10 years later, a distant roll of thunder still prompts a shared look between us. A quiet vow to respect nature's sudden power, especially the stealthy rise of a river. That beautiful August night remains etched into our memory. A beautiful evening that taught us how fragile safety can be. The most unsettling tale I've ever encountered didn't originate from a horror film or a best-selling novel. It was shared with me by an elderly woman I encountered during a solitary hike in the wooded fringes near Cross Timbers State Park in Kansas. In my later 30s, I had taken 2 long walks in nature as an escape from the relentless pressures of everyday life. The silence among the trees, the fresh air, it helped me reset and stay centered. One mild spring afternoon, I drove to the park, parked, and set off on a lesser used path, eager to unwind. The area felt eerily empty that day, as if no other soul had ventured out. After a couple of hours of steady trekking along the trail that skirted the park's boundary, passing through scattered open patches, I came upon an unexpected sight. In a quiet glade, ringed by ancient oaks, sunlight filtering through the leaves, stood 4 weathered gravestones. They tilted slightly, eroded by time and weather, half hidden in overgrown grass. I knelt to clear the weeds and decipher the inscriptions. The names, though faint, revealed a single family, a father and his 3 sons. What struck me like ice water was the identical date carved beneath each name: April 7th, 1859. An entire family extinguished on the same day. Disease? A tragic mishap? Or something far more sinister? My mind raced with questions. As I lingered, absorbed in thought, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the stillness. Turning, I saw a woman crossing the meadow toward me. She appeared to be in her late 50s, her appearance worn by years and hardship. Yet her eyes held a piercing clarity and resolve. She demanded to know what I was doing on her property. I quickly explained that I was merely a hiker who had wandered off the marked trail, drawn by curiosity about the graves. My apology and genuine interest seemed to ease her suspicion. Introducing myself properly, I learned her name was Martha. She revealed she was the great-great-granddaughter of one of the men buried there. Her demeanor shifted. She appeared almost relieved that someone cared enough to ask. Without much prompting, she began recounting the grim family legend, a story handed down through generations. She set the scene in the turbulent era known as Bleeding Kansas, when the territory was a battleground over slavery's future. Violence simmered everywhere. Free soilers received shipments disguised as religious texts, but packed with Sharps rifles, nicknamed Beecher's Bibles. Pro-slavery forces from Missouri and beyond armed themselves similarly. It was a prelude to the Civil War, lawless and bloody. Many weapons never reached their intended recipients. Opportunistic peddlers roamed the countryside, hawking stolen or lost firearms to whoever could pay. Martha's great-great-grandfather, Ezekiel, desperate to protect his farm from raiders, arranged a clandestine meeting in the woods with one such dealer rather than travel to a distant town. Ezekiel never returned. His father and brothers, growing anxious, searched for him. They discovered his corpse, mutilated in a way that suggested dark ritual, though the worst details had been spared in family retellings. The sight haunted Martha, even as she described it. Consumed by grief and fury, the remaining men vowed vengeance. Word spread of a similar rifle seller operating nearby, luring buyers into isolated meetings. They tracked him to a neighboring settlement, gathered leads from locals, and ventured into the forest to confront him. Like Ezekiel before them, they vanished. Days later, their horses were found tethered near an abandoned, decaying wooden church. A search party entered the crumbling structure and found the bodies of Ezekiel's father and brothers sprawled on the rotting floorboards. They had shot one another in what appeared to be a mutual destruction, but no motive or sequence made sense. The local sheriff arrived with bloodhounds. The dogs traced the three men's paths, but detected a fourth scent, belonging to an unknown person. Following it led to a remote cave. There, the usually fearless hounds refused to approach, cowering and whining in terror. The deputies ventured inside anyways, finding only discarded clothing and scattered animal bones. No trace of the mysterious fourth figure. Martha passed at this point, her eyes distant, as if peering into that shadowed cave once more. Then, in a quiet, unwavering voice, she shared her conviction. Her ancestors had encountered the devil himself. She believed the evil one had deceived them, sowing lies and paranoia until they turned their weapons on each other. Good men, she insisted, but merely mortal, vulnerable when blinded by rage and sorrow. She recited a verse about the devil's countless victims, a mighty throng felled by his cunning. I probed, gently, for other possibilities. A hidden grudge, perhaps, or a trick by the salesman. But she shook her head. The family had been grieving and vengeful, easy prey for something that preyed on such weaknesses. She was certain the devil walked among us, seeking the angry and the broken. I didn't challenge her faith in the tale. The weight of it settled heavily between us. Four lives snuffed out so violently, whether by infernal design or human malice, was horrifying enough. We stood in silence by the graves as the light faded. Finally, I thanked her for entrusting me with their memory. She offered a faint, sorrowful smile, saying it was important to remember. They hadn't deserved such an end. I agreed, bid her farewell, and retraced my steps to the trail. The walk back felt different. The peaceful woods now seemed watchful, concealing unseen threats. In the following days and weeks, the details replayed endlessly. Ezekiel's fatal bargain for protection in chaotic times, the family's desperate quest for justice, the inexplicable carnage in that forsaken church, and the enigmatic cave where even dogs feared to tread. Who was the fourth present? Had the rifle peddler orchestrated a deadly trap, or was something more otherworldly at play? The mutilation of Ezekiel's body hinted at savagery beyond mere robbery. Martha's explanation, though extreme, provided a chilling framework for the inexplicable. I remained skeptical of the supernatural, yet the story lingers. In those woods, I once found refuge. I now sense echoes of old violence and unanswered questions. Some horrors defy tidy explanation, and that, perhaps, is what makes them truly terrifying. I've always been drawn to Algonquin Provincial Park in the depths of winter. The vast frozen wilderness stretches endlessly through Ontario, and the backcountry trails grew eerily deserted once late December arrives. Deep snow turns every step into work. Temperatures plummet, and the short days vanish quickly. For me, though, that isolation is the appeal. My name is Mark Delory. At 32, I live by myself and handle my job remotely, so I can disappear into the woods whenever the urge strikes. Most times, it's just me and my Labrador, Toby, a steady, watchful companion who gives me confidence when the forest feels too still. This incident took place roughly 5 years ago on a sharp, windless winter afternoon that felt perfect for a hike. We pulled into the Brent Road trailhead around 1:15. The lot sat completely empty, exactly how I prefer it. I shouldered my pack, glanced at my watch, and figured the loop would take about 4 hours, tight with the fading light, but doable. We moved at a comfortable rhythm along the familiar path, through thick strands of evergreens, besides ice-locked ponds and creeks, over low ridges. 2 hours in, we reached the small open area above a frozen lake. I threw a stick for Toby while I sipped water and caught my breath. The surrounding hills sliced the pale sky, throwing long blue shadows across the snow. The silence was absolute, the kind that only exists far from any road or house. When I checked the time again, I realized how quickly the afternoon had slipped away. It was pushing 4:20, and the light was already thinning. I swore under my breath for underestimating winter dusk. My GPS showed roughly 45 minutes back to the car. We needed to move. Toby led the way, tail high, as we retraced our steps. About 10 minutes later, something caught my eye beside the trail, a solitary boot print pressed deep into the untouched snow. The print was noticeably bigger than mine. We hadn't seen another soul all day, and no other tracks branched off or approached it. Just this one mark alone. A flicker of unease stirred, but I told myself it could have been left earlier by someone who stepped off trail briefly. Toby gave it a quick sniff and moved on without concern, so I did the same. The forest grew denser, shadows pooling thicker under the trees. We broke out into a broad open meadow just as the sky turned a bruised twilight blue. My pulse picked up. This was no place to be caught after dark. Halfway across the field, a wave of primal dread slammed into me. Cold, instinctive fear that raised every hair on my arms and neck. I halted. Toby froze beside me, ears flat, tail tucked, a low rumble building in his throat. I turned slowly. At the distant tree line stood a dark human silhouette, perfectly still against the woods. No movement, no sound, just an unmistakable shape darker than the background. Even from that distance, menace rode off of it in waves. My heart hammered against my ribs. No other car had been in the lot. No one could have walked in behind us without us noticing. Toby's growl deepened to something uneasy. I whispered, "Easy, boy," though the words did nothing to calm the panic rising inside me. The figure hadn't shifted, but it was watching, waiting for my next move. I didn't wait to find out what came next. I gripped Toby's leash, barked, "Let's go," and we bolted. Snow sprang around us as we ran, branches snapping past, breath burning in my lungs. I didn't look back. Every sense screamed that the figure would follow, and that when it did, it would close the gap fast. We tore through the woods, slipping on ice patches, scrambling over roots. My legs felt like they might give out, but fear kept them moving. At last, the final switchback appeared, the steep climb to the parking area. Relief spiked, then died. The open slope would leave us completely exposed. I attacked the incline, zigzagging up the narrow path. My thighs screamed. Halfway up, I risked one glance back. The figure stood motionless at the bottom. For a heartbeat, I hoped it might stay there. Then it surged forward, not following the switchback, but charging straight up the hillside in a direct, powerful line, cutting across the slope as though gravity and ice meant nothing. Terror flooded me fresh. I clawed upward, feet sliding, Toby barking urgently at my side. Near the crest, I yelled over my shoulder, "Get away!" But the only answer was the relentless crunch of pursuit drawing closer. We burst out of the trees into the parking lot. My Subaru waited alone, or so I thought. Parked right beside it sat a black pickup truck that had definitely not been there when we arrived. My stomach lurched. He'd been here this whole time, waiting. Keys slipped from my shaking fingers and clattered into the snow. I snatched them up, jammed them into the lock, flung the door open, and shoved Toby inside before diving in after him. I slammed the door just as the figure reached the lot. For a frozen second, he stood there. No banging on the glass, no reaching for the handle. Then he spun, vaulted into the truck, and the engine roared to life. Tires spun wildly on ice, the vehicle fishtailing before rocketing down Brent Road and vanishing into the night. Silence crashed back in. I sat rigid, breath fogging the windshield in frantic bursts. Toby pressed against me, trembling. I couldn't move. I stared at the dark skid marks, scarring the snow, waiting for headlights to reappear. Hours passed before I trusted myself to start the engine and drive away. The police listened when I reported it the next day, but their polite skepticism was clear. No cameras, no witnesses, no trace. I returned to the trailhead a week later, alone in daylight, needing proof I hadn't hallucinated it. My frantic tracks still scarred the switchback. Beside them ran the stranger's print, long strides, straight up the steepest line, deep and deliberate. At the clearing where I'd first seen the single print, it remained, frozen and untouched. No trail led to it, no trail led away, just one impossible footprint, as though someone had materialized there and waited, patient, motionless, for me to walk into view. The realization settled like ice in my veins. This wasn't chance. He had chosen the spot, timed the darkness, positioned the truck. He knew I'd come. I backed away, then hurried to the car and left the park behind. I haven't returned alone since. On long winter nights when snow muffles the world outside, my thoughts still drift to that single shape at the edge of the field, to the truck that appeared from nowhere, and to the keys glinting in the snow. One more second of fumbling, and I wouldn't be here telling this story now. In the remote northwest corner of Montana, Libby Creek winds gently through the dense woods of the Kudana National Forest, roughly half an hour south of the quiet little town of Libby. Locals enjoy heading there to try their luck at recreational gold panning, but the spot remains secluded enough to stay mostly free of out-of-towners. My partner Ryan and I, visitors from Idaho, had impulsively decided to take a summer road trip across the state line. We were eager for some hiking, adventure, and perhaps dabbling in gold panning as a relaxing novelty. We pulled into the area about 7 p.m. on July 3rd. The place felt serene and empty. We parked our Subaru at a turnout close to the initial bridge along Libby Creek Road, stepped out to stretch, and took in the crisp, pine-heavy air. The water ran clear over pebbled stretches, framed by deep forest, with the late afternoon sunlight still warm but the breeze pleasantly cool. We'd barely settled in when a sturdy older pickup rolled up. A man in his mid-40s climbed out with his young son, who looked about 10 or 11. They were welcoming and introduced themselves. Jason was the dad. He lit up when he learned we were new to panning and keen to try it. After a short conversation, he suggested showing us a quieter stretch farther along the creek. "I've got a little claim down there," he said, pointing to a slim dirt track hugging the water. The gravel's less worked over. We jumped at the chance, gathered our supplies, and trailed the pair down the peaceful path. It was only about a 10-minute hike before we reached a hidden gravel shelf beside the stream. For the next couple of hours, Jason kindly walked us through the basics of panning, while his son proudly displayed a few minuscule specks he'd discovered. The atmosphere stayed easy and laid back, with the creek's murmur and the softening evening light creating a perfect calm. Around 8-ish, I tossed out a light-hearted question. "Ever come across anything strange out here other than gold?" Jason's easy grin slipped for a moment. He traded a fast glance with his boy before replying carefully. "Yeah, actually. Last fall, a bit further downstream, we found something disturbing." The kid piped up immediately, eyes wide. It was a human arm. No one cracked a smile or brushed it off. Ryan's expression sobered instantly, and a cold chill ran straight through me. Jason went into a subdued tone. They notified authorities, naturally, but the matter went nowhere. People disappear in the woods with unsettling frequency. Some stray off paths, others simply vanish. He scanned the lengthening shadows. Plenty of folks live way off the grid out here, and they prefer staying hidden. After those big fires a few years ago, estimates put more than 10,000 people scattered through these forests. No records, no contact. You have to stay alert. I shot Ryan a silent look, my unease plain. Jason wasn't trying to frighten us. His warning felt sincere. Even so, the uncomfortable warmth of the night had acquired an edge. By 8:30, I decided to fetch my hoodie from the car before full dark set in. I left the others at the gravel bar and walked the short trail back alone. The forest had grown noticeably still, and a sudden sense of exposure made my steps quicker. At the parking area, a dark gray truck crawled past at a low speed. I caught the sounds of dogs barking from within, but the driver remained shadowed. Nothing struck me as alarming right then. Vehicles were permitted on the road, but The lack of any greeting or normal pace felt slightly off. I snatched my sweatshirt, secured the car, and hustled back down the trail. When I rejoined them, Jason and his son were already stowing their equipment. They said their goodbyes, urged us to take care, and departed around 9:30. Ryan and I stayed a little longer, savoring the fading daylight. As we headed toward the car at dusk, Ryan stopped at the bridge, intrigued by a spot he'd spotted at the opposite side of the turnout. "I'm going to peek over there real quick," he said. "You can hang here if you'd rather." I agreed, sliding into the passenger seat and locking up. The deepening twilight turned the surrounding trees into looming silhouettes, their shapes somehow more oppressive. A quiet anxiety settled over me, growing heavier by the minute. I told myself it was just the echo of Jason's grim tale, but the stillness pressed into insistently, my heartbeat picking up without cause. Minutes later, Ryan reappeared, moving fast and stiff. He hurried to the car. I popped the lock. His face was drawn. "Everything okay?" I asked, already sensing trouble. "Not sure," he muttered, checking behind him. "I kept feeling eyes on me the whole time. See anything strange up here?" Before I could answer, the same gray truck appeared ahead, easing onto the bridge and halting midway, directly across our only way out. My gut lurched. "That's the one from earlier," I breathed. The engine idled as the driver's door opened. A lean man, maybe mid-50s, stepped down in jeans, a worn plaid shirt, and a cap tugged low. In the failing light, his features stayed hard to read, but his attention felt sharp as he approached. Ryan lowered his window a crack and called out evenly, "Evening. You the property owner?" The man stopped, hands relaxed. "No," he replied in a low, measured voice. "Just wondering what brings you folks here." Ryan kept his tone level. "Gold panning. We're wrapping up and heading out now." The stranger tilted his head, eyeing our vehicle, then me directly. "Just you two?" The question hung, not overtly menacing, but the deliberate slowness set my nerves alight. He stood nearer than felt right, close enough to reach the door handle, trapped between the creek and solid woods. The space shrank. "Yes, just us," Ryan said calmly, nodding past the blocking truck. "Mind letting us through?" After a pause, the man retreated a step, giving a slight nod. "Go ahead." He returned to his truck without another word. Ryan exhaled and shifted into reverse. But before we could move far, the truck's reverse lights flared, and it backed up again, resealing the path. The quiet stretched taut. Tail lights bathed our windshield in red. Then, a sharp horn blast shattered the stillness, jolting me. The door opened once more. The man strode back, faster now, stopping nearer still. His voice had hardened. "You people searching for something specific out here?" "No," Ryan answered firmly, eyes forward. "We're leaving, like I said." The man pressed on as though he hadn't heard. "There's a nice private campground about a mile up the road. Real peaceful, quiet, almost no one around. Could suit a couple like you." His gaze slid to me again, lingering. Ice slid through me. I pressed deeper into the seat. "Appreciate it, but we're heading home," Ryan said, sharper now. The man stood motionless for long seconds, staring intently as though weighing options. At last, he backed away, climbed into his cab, and shut the door hard. After an agonizing wait, he pulled forward, opening the route. Go now, I urged, clutching Ryan's sleeve. He accelerated onto the road. As we passed, I glanced involuntarily at the driver's window. The man's face was blank, eyes locked straight ahead, hands tight on the wheel. He never turned to look. My trembling hands finally unclenched as we drove away. Ryan's jaw stayed set. That was seriously off, he said quietly. Who drives around at night like that? No fishing stuff. Dogs barking inside. The words hung unanswered as the creek receded behind us. Then, in the darkness, lining the trail ahead, a figure stood motionless at the forest's edge, half swallowed by shadow, alone, watching. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true creepy backwoods stories. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the members of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much, as I always say, for your dedication to the channel and myself. You're what's holding it up. So I thank you so much for that. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have a voice. I'd be sitting here talking to myself like a crazy person. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.